Blind fire! Noah Grayson yelled. Behind him, his team dispersed on either side. Noah squeezed the trigger of his weapon, firing over his shoulder as he sprinted forward, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Stay sharp! He called out, glancing sideways to ensure the others were keeping pace. They were trained for this, elite, focused, but the pressure was on. Cover, now! Noah shouted, diving behind a crumbling wall. His squad followed, scrambling for the nearest debris as fear kicked in. Without looking, they pointed their weapons and fired, the loud cracks of gunshots echoing all around them. Noah felt the rush of bullets zipping past, each one too close for comfort. Grenade! Someone yelled. Noah barely had time to brace himself before the explosion shook the ground. All right, listen up, Noah Grayson called, his voice cutting through the roar of the helicopter blades. As the leader of the elite mobile task force MTF Zeta-9 Mole Rats, he stood tall in the cramped cabin, determination etched on his face. The glint in his eyes held their attention, even as the whir of the rotors threatened to drown him out. Heading into a quarantine area, and reports indicate that SCP-610 is spreading. Word from above is that some of the other SCPs had been sent for testing, and our mission is to locate any missing personnel or anomalies and deal with them as needed. Understood? Nothing like a little anomaly hunting to spice up the day. Jasper Carter replied with a grin. Let's hope they're just playing hide and seek, Olivia Hernandez chimed in, her voice steady, but her eyes betraying a hint of anxiety. Noah smirked slightly, appreciating the humor despite the gravity of their mission. Just keep your guard up. We don't want any surprises, especially with what's been transferred to this area. Any idea what they sent there? Liv asked. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in. They haven't given me the full details of what might have gone wrong, but there's one in particular we need to be on the lookout for. Or I guess I should say, one that we don't want to see. The steady thump of the helicopter's rotors beat out as they flew over the vast expanse of snow-covered Siberia. Emptiness stretched out before them, bleak and uninviting. But then the Foundation outpost slowly came into view, a dark silhouette against the endless white. Even from a distance, it looked abandoned, and that only heightened Noah's concern. The helicopter landed with a jolt, and the team quickly unstrapped themselves. Everyone stay close, Noah ordered, motioning for them to move out. Keep your eyes open for anything unusual. Let's move out! They stepped out into the frigid air, the biting cold slapping them in the face. Noah led the way, his breath visible in the air. This place has been silent for too long. Let's check in. The outpost loomed ahead, a series of metal buildings enveloped in an eerie silence. As they approached, Noah noticed the first signs of struggle. The door to the main building was ajar, and deep scratch marks marred the walls. Stay alert, he warned, nodding toward the entrance. They moved inside. The sound of their footsteps felt loud and out of place in the deserted hallways. Flickering lights cast ominous shadows on the walls, making it feel like the very building was alive and watching them. Noah glanced around, taking in the overturned furniture and scattered papers. Looks like they left in a hurry, Jasper murmured. No one laughed. Half-open doors lined the corridor, creaking softly as if inviting them to look inside. Noah could hear the faint sounds of their own breathing and the rustle of gear, but otherwise, it was too quiet, too still. Keep your weapons ready, Noah whispered. Every instinct told him something was off. The feeling gnawed at him, making his skin crawl. They passed broken windows where shards of glass glinted like sharp teeth, catching the light in strange ways. Outside, the snowy landscape provided a stark reminder of how isolated they were. The wind howled softly, like a ghostly warning. As they reached the control room door, Noah hesitated, glancing back at his team. It was in these moments that a faint hint of doubt always crept in. What if he had made a mistake and was leading his team right into a trap? You good, boss? Jasper inquired. Noah shook the doubt away and flashed Jasper a quick grin. He steadied himself and pushed the door to the control room open. With well-rehearsed motions, they stepped inside, weapons raised, scanning the room. It was empty, but the air was heavy, like it was holding its breath. The remnants of scattered papers and broken furniture hinted at a struggle, but there was no sign of life. Noah's gut twisted as his doubt came thundering back. Something was definitely wrong. Monitors were flickering with static, and the room was in disarray, but it was the bloody footprints leading away from the screens that made Noah's heart drop. "What the hell happened here?" one of the team members asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Noah crouched down, examining the prints. "These look fresh. We're not alone." He straightened, a frown etched on his face. "Start planting explosives. If the worst happens, we blow this whole place." As members of the team started planting remote explosives, the rest pressed further into the control room. But a sudden squelching sound made Noah freeze. He looked down, his boot partially sunken into a thick, slimy substance that clung to the floor like tar. One of his teammates cursed, lifting their foot to reveal a similar sticky mess that stretched in tendrils as they moved. The team exchanged uneasy glances as a pungent, rotting smell began to fill the air. Noah knelt cautiously, shining his flashlight across the floor. What he saw made his stomach churn. The slime was not just on the floor. It was interwoven with patches of raw, pulsing flesh that seemed to stretch out like veins along the ground, up the walls, and across the ceiling. He followed the grotesque growth with his eyes, and they came to rest on a sickening sight. The twisted, mangled remains of what had once been an MTF unit, their faces contorted in a mixture of terror and agony. But it was worse than that. The bodies were not just lying there. They were grotesquely fused with the sticky, fleshy growths of SCP-610. The infectious mass creeping through their hollow eye sockets merged with their exposed muscles and bones. "Oh, God," Jasper gasped, nearly retching. "Hold on," Olivia murmured, kneeling beside one of the figures. "We might have a survivor." She reached out, trying to clear away some of the infected flesh that clung to the armor. "Hey, can you hear me?" she whispered. The figure shifted slightly, and Olivia's heart leapt. She leaned in closer, squinting in the dim light. The face was swollen, the skin stretched tight and pale under layers of infection, but she could still make out the features: a nose, a mouth, a pair of sunken eyes hidden behind infected tissue. "Stay with me," she murmured, and then the figure's head jerked up, the infected skin peeling back just enough to reveal its face. Olivia's flashlight caught the hollow eyes and she inhaled sharply. The face was gaunt and distorted, almost skeletal, with patches of SCP-610 flesh merging into it, features that were painfully familiar. In that moment, Olivia realized the horror staring back at her. She had been briefed on what SCP-096 might look like, but this was even more nightmarish than what she could have ever imagined. Infected, mutated, and far more terrifying. And she had done the one thing you were never, ever supposed to do. She had looked directly at its face. "No," she breathed, stumbling back as her eyes locked onto its hollow gaze. "No, no, no." The creature let out a bone-chilling growl, a sound so twisted it seemed to vibrate the very air around them. Olivia felt a surge of pure terror, but her body was frozen, the gaze of SCP-096 holding her captive. Noah shouted, "Olivia, get back!" As he realized what had happened, he yanked her away from the creature, but SCP-096 was already stirring, its infected limbs convulsing as it strained against the SCP-610 growths holding it down. Olivia stumbled backward, her face pale as realization and fear flooded through her. It's SCP-096, she stammered, horror dawning in her voice. "It's been infected." The creature broke free from the fleshy restraints, its limbs now bloated with pulsating infected flesh. Its movements, though slower than normal, were erratic and aggressive. Without hesitation, Noah barked, "Run! Everyone, out now!" Behind them, the creature let out a deep, guttural roar, its fury and agony echoing down the halls as it tore through the outpost in pursuit. "Keep moving! Don't look back!" Noah yelled, leading the charge as they sprinted through the outpost. They ducked through doorways and around corners, the monster's guttural cries echoing behind them. "Go!" One of the team members shouted, panic rising in his voice. SCP-096 crashed through a nearby wall, sending debris flying. Its eyes were wide and unseeing. Olivia was directly in its path, barely turning in time to see the creature hurtling toward her. SCP-096's infected, bloated arm swung out and caught her in a crushing grip. Olivia screamed as the creature lifted her into the air, her body writhing helplessly as it held her aloft. SCP-096's claws dug into her shoulders, its grip tightening with monstrous strength. With terrifying ease, it pulled, and Olivia's body tore apart under the immense force. Blood sprayed across the room as her screams were abruptly silenced, her form left twisted and broken in the creature's hands. "No!" Noah's voice cracked as he took a step forward, his heart pounding, before turning away to be sure he wouldn't see SCP-096's face if it turned towards him. Other MTF members weren't as quick, though, and caught sight of its face, and now the infected SCP-096 turned on them, tearing through their ranks. Noah could only watch helplessly as one of his teammates were thrown against the wall, his organs crushed on impact by SCP-096's maddened strength. They had no choice. They had to keep running. The remaining team stumbled into a small storage area, the air thick with dust and the smell of rusted metal. Crates were stacked haphazardly against the walls, and broken equipment littered the floor. As the team caught their breath, Noah's eyes darted to the entrance. Panic flashed across the faces of his remaining teammates as they scanned the room, realizing there was no way out. Noah clenched his jaw. "Barricade the door," he ordered, his tone firm but strained. Are we safe?" someone asked. But then the first scratch of claws against the door made them all jump. Someone must have seen its face, but no one was sure who. The sound of claws raking against the door grew louder. Noah could feel the ground beneath them shift as the creature slammed against the barricade. He glanced at his team, seeing the fear in their eyes, and took a deep breath to steady himself. "We need to lure it back to the control room," he said. "Once we get in there, we can use the explosives to collapse the building. It might be weak enough from the infection that we can trap it." "How?" a teammate asked, fear in their eyes. "It'll kill us!" "One of us has to draw its attention," Noah said, the grim reality settling in. Silence hung in the air, tension thick as they glanced around, weighing their options. Just then, Jasper stepped forward, his expression unexpectedly serious. "Noah's right," he insisted. "There's only one way to get out of this." Noah knew what his old friend was about to suggest. "Jas, you don't have to do this." Jasper ignored him, though. "It's the only way we all don't go down here. It's not gonna end like this." Noah's throat tightened, but he forced himself to nod. He clasped Jasper's shoulder. "You sure about this?" Jasper nodded, determination in his eyes. "Yeah, just give me the detonator." Noah's heart sank, but he nodded, knowing he didn't have much of a choice. As he handed the remote detonator to his old friend, their eyes locked for a brief instant, an unspoken understanding passing between them. "You know what to do," Noah said, his voice low and steady, despite the anxiety churning inside of him. Jasper took a deep breath, steeling himself for the dangerous task ahead. "No sweat, boss. Just hold the line," he replied, his tone light, as he moved toward the barricade. Noah turned to his unit. "Get ready to open fire! We need to keep it distracted while he makes his move." He braced himself for a moment before yelling, "Ow!" The last piece of the barricade was removed and the door flung open. With a deafening roar, the mole rats unleashed a hail of bullets towards SCP-096. The air was riddled with the sharp crack of gunfire, drowning out the creature's cries. SCP-096 barely had time to lunge for them as bullets tore into its flesh, the creature writhing under the onslaught. "Hey, ugly!" Jasper shouted from behind the thrashing beast. The creature's head snapped toward him, its eyes wide with unseeing rage. "Move!" Noah yelled to the remaining team members as the MTF unit slipped out of the storage room. He glanced back, and a surge of dread washed over him when he saw Jasper leading SCP-096 down the hallway toward the control room. Noah pushed his unit out of the building, guiding them toward the safety of the outpost perimeter. Every corner they turned felt like a gamble, but Noah stayed focused, checking back occasionally to make sure everyone was still with him. Once outside, the frigid Siberian wind stung their cheeks and eyes as the mole rats raced across the snow, urgency driving them forward. Their hearts pounded in their chests, each step fueled by the weight of the moment. Then, just as they reached the edge of the outpost, the explosion erupted behind them, sending tremors through the ground and a thunderous boom that ricocheted through the air. Noah and the mole rats stood frozen for a moment, their breath still catching from the rush of escaping the nightmare behind them. Noah's mind raced, torn between grief for the fallen Joker and the relief of making it out alive. But something tugged at Noah's gut, almost as though things weren't over yet. That's when he saw it. In the distance among the rubble of the collapsed building, movement. At first it was just a shadow, but then they caught sight of it. SCP-096. Its twisted, infected form clawing its way free from the wreckage, chunks of concrete and twisted metal peeling away from its body. Its flesh, infected by SCP-610, hung from its frame like grotesque patches, pulsing and twitching as it moved. Noah stared, dread filling his chest as he watched the creature slowly drag itself from the ruins. "Boss," one of the team members stammered, their voice shaking. I saw its face." Noah turned sharply to the teammate, his eyes wide, the implications sinking in like a cold dagger. The rest of the team stiffened, their confusion palpable. "What?" Noah asked, his voice quiet but tense. I didn't mean it," the team member whispered, their face pale. "Back in the storage room. It just happened. I saw its eyes." A heavy silence fell over them like a crushing weight. The realization was immediate and terrifying. The explosion, the sacrifice, Jasper's death, it was all for nothing. SCP-096 would not stop now. It was going to hunt them down, no matter where they ran. Noah clenched his fists, his mind racing. He felt a creeping dread settle in his chest, but he couldn't afford to lose focus. "It won't stop," he muttered, eyes hardening. "It'll find you, it'll find us, and it will kill us all until we find a way to stay ahead of it." As the mole rats scrambled toward the safety of the outpost perimeter, Noah grabbed his radio, sending an urgent transmission to Foundation HQ. "This is Zeta-9 reporting SCP-096 has been compromised. It's merged with SCP-610. Immediate quarantine of the entire region is required. Do you copy?" The radio crackled with static. Noah repeated his message, frustration gnawing at him. "Do you copy?" Nothing. "God, comms are down," Noah muttered through gritted teeth. He slammed the radio against his chest. He glanced at his team, their faces painted over with fear and exhaustion. Would they make it out of this mission alive? They needed a plan, but they had no clear way to communicate with HQ. "We have to head to higher ground," Noah snapped. "There's a mountain nearby, right at the edge of the SCP-610 corruption. It's our best shot at reconnecting with home." "But we'll be walking right around the edge of the infection," one team member said, anxiety in their voice. "What if it spreads faster than we can move?" Noah met their gaze, fear gnawing at the back of his mind, but he couldn't let it show. "We don't have a choice. It's either that, or SCP-096 catches up to us, and we know what happens then." The team shared uneasy glances but nodded. They knew the stakes. They had no control over the infection. They had no control over SCP-096's relentless pursuit, but they had one shot to stay ahead, and they had to take it. As they began their trek toward the mountain, the weight of their lost squad mates still fresh in their minds, Noah couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. The infection, the creature, the uncertainty of what awaited them. It all felt like chaos was tightening its grip. And as they moved forward, the distant roar of SCP-096 clawing through the rubble echoed faintly in the air, a reminder that the hunt had resumed.